Welcome to Anuga F&B Talks. In this series, we are inviting global players and innovators from the industry to share their stories and showcase their innovation in anticipation of Anuga 2025, the biggest trade show for the food and beverage industry worldwide. Thanks for tuning in.
I just had the pleasure to chat with Lou Ann Williams from Innova Market Insights about the trend topics for Anuga 2025. So there are plenty of trend topics, obviously personalized nutrition, alternative proteins, but also private label, snackification, among others. It was really a cool ride to go through all the trends and see what's really driving Anuga and what's driving the industry forward this year. So tune into our podcast and enjoy. Lou Ann, great to have you. You're the Global Senior Vice President for Research at Innova Market Insights. Great to have you on the show for our Anuga F&B Talks. And as I learned, Innova is playing quite a central role in the Anuga 2025 because together you have identified the key trends based on the research that you do, right?
Correct. Yep. We are the trends partner for Anuga, so we will be giving a lot of presentations and really try to add something to the user experience at the show.
Hi, I'm Philip from Anuga, and if you want to meet our knowledge partner Innova Market Insights, visit Anuga in Cologne this year, visit the biggest trade show for the food and beverage industry. We are looking forward to meet you there.
So there are a lot of trends, personalized nutrition, alternative protein, snacking, convenience, private label, among others. So there are plenty more. Mm-hmm. And that's coming from the 2025 Trends survey that you've done. Yeah. Can you just give us an overview? So what are the key findings?
Yep. So every year we spend months and months and months doing trend research. So we do mega trends research to see what are those big issues impacting consumers. We do kind of a mega trend consumers, and then we do our top 10 trends. So by the time we release our top 10 trends, we've already spent 4 or 5 months just really deciding what's really going to happen this year. It's all grounded in data. And so, as you said, some of those trends are around sustainability. It's around healthy eating, nutrition, proteins, new proteins, ingredients, and so on. So, so all we do is look at food trends and try to predict what's coming next. They do that to look at the themes of the show and what's happening. And so when we just try to help ground it in data and what's happening. So exactly right, because Anuga has, thousands of exhibitors, and it's nice to be able to organize them in a way which is really relevant and matches the trends that are happening.
Yeah. So personalized nutrition is so one of the major themes this year again. So how is this trend evolving at the moment? Can you share some insight about that? Yeah,
sure. So I think personalized nutrition was maybe really the first category of foods that fit into this was gluten-free. Because, and to some extent lactose-free, because it really helped consumers to understand they could eat something that made them feel different than somebody else, their friend or their partner or whoever. And so as time has evolved, we all know we now can have personalized music, we can have personalized, entertainment, we watch movies on Netflix. So everything is getting more personalized. So now consumers are very aware of they can eat in a way that's very personalized for them. Some people can eat a dairy ice cream and some people cannot eat a dairy ice cream and still feel good. So now we have tools, we have ways to track it. There's lots of AI coaches. It's easier now. There's lots of, private labs that will test your blood and will tell you what you can eat or what you can't eat. So there's a lot of things that have come together that have converged that now make personalized nutrition. It's a way to eat. And it can also be based on, to some extent, your lifestyle. Maybe you want to only eat sustainably or organic, or if you're a woman, you might want to look for products that are really targeted to your needs. So there's lots of different ways to come at this. There's not just one way to do it, but personalized nutrition just means you're eating for yourself in the way that makes you feel good. Yeah.
You mentioned gluten-free as maybe the first presence of personalized nutrition. Is that an example for patterns that are getting more into the mass market? Because obviously not everyone, or maybe only a really small target group right now is using these digital tools, the trackers and stuff.
Sure.
But then I understand it's coming in waves, and gluten-free might be an example for a more advanced wave in that sense.
Yeah, and I think gluten-free, and a lot of people eat gluten-free that are not affected by it, right? So, but it became a way that people are like, oh, okay, they hear more about it. It kind of went mainstream. In the United States, it went very mainstream. But it starts to be one of those indicators or clues that consumers think, oh, gee, there is a way to eat that's something that you eat can be very personalized. And of course, you're right about the trackers. There's so many things you can do to track. There's blood sugar diets, there's all kinds of things. But if you go into social media now, you see there are a lot of people that are tracking their blood sugar, and they're looking to see, okay, I'm, got my tracker on, I'm going to eat this piece of candy, or I'm going to eat an avocado, or they do all kind of tests, and then they show what happens, right? But a lot of people watch this now and they go, gee, I never thought about that. Or maybe they thought, I wake up in the middle of the night a lot, and then they read somewhere else. So it could be that your cortisol spikes in the middle of the night, right? So it could be very much related to how you eat. So there's lots of different clues, and people are being exposed to different aspects of personalized nutrition, So I think sometimes people think it just means you have to go get a blood test and somebody has to tell you what to eat. Not exactly. It can also be lifestyle driven. Maybe you don't want to eat, certain types of foods or certain ingredients you want to avoid, or so on. And then again, all these tools make it very easy to track. You can take a picture of everything you eat and it automatically is tracked in, some of these online apps and so on. So personalized nutrition is, I think if you want to get to the extreme version of it, and I'm actually doing a trial on myself on personalized nutrition. It's still very expensive if you want to be really, really precise, but we're getting there. So there's lots of tools and lots of things that people can do. So lots of ways for companies to tap into this opportunity to help consumers make that really good connection between a very personal way of eating for themselves.
All right. So talking about sustainability, which is a big term, of course. But it seems that especially in the last year, 2024, there has been some disillusion about the whole concept of sustainable food and its consumption. At least this is what we noticed. How do you think, what does the data tell about sustainability? So there are some people arguing that it has become a core expectation or hygiene factor. But it also, based on our observation, it seems that people are really getting away from the term sustainability, and pleasure and all these things are more in the focus right now.
Yeah. Well, I think we're in a cycle where if we go back to 2008, when we had a big economic crash, downturn, I think most people call it, what you saw is that consumers made a shift towards safety. That's when we started getting like grandmama's recipe, tradition, all this shift in nostalgia, because it made everybody feel safe. Then we've come out of that, and we went through COVID, and then we had this massive, supply chain shock. We had, of course, it was a masterclass in health. Everybody saw somebody that they knew either get very sick or die in some cases. And then we still have inflation, cost of living crisis, cost of housing, and so on. The other thing that happened in 2022, I mentioned that we do these mega trends. And so we ask consumers, what are your global concerns? And so for years and years and years, the number one global concern for pretty much every consumer, we do this globally, was health. And then we saw sustainability start to move up in the past couple of years. And then in 2022, we saw in Germany, in the USA, and a few other countries, political instability became number one concern in Europe and in the U.S. Okay, then we go back to health, after COVID and so on. And now we have another big issue of political instability, right? So when you still have a price issue, you have a supply chain issue, and you just have to make it. Nobody was talking about sustainability during COVID very much because you had other priorities. So I think it's just shifted on the priority list for now. But when you talk to ingredient suppliers, they'll tell you things are not growing in the same place anymore. I think the other thing that's happened over the past 5 years, I remember at the very beginning of COVID, Australia caught on fire, and so there were massive wildfires. We've seen floods. We've seen floods recently in Southern Europe. Just all kind of strange things happening weather-wise, right? So it's still in the back of consumers' mind that these crazy things are happening. But if you are going to the grocery store and you're super stressed because your rent is now, has gone up by 30%, you're probably going to be focused on what you can afford, and sustainability is probably not up there. But over the longer term, it's an absolute necessity, right? Because we're going to have big supply chain issues. So I think this is really kind of temporary, but still 50% of consumers say they care how it's made, and they don't want to buy things that are overly wasteful. So there's that part of it. And there's also, what does sustainability mean to everybody, right? We see a lot of claims around plastic and a lot of discussion around plastic, but there's other things, soil health and regenerative agriculture and animal health. So there's this big umbrella term for sustainability. So I think we're in a temporary kind of, companies are saying, like, we can't do everything. They're now in a political environment where it's okay to kind of pull back a little bit, but over the long term, this is going to be really, really important.
Would you agree that also a lot of the concepts are too complicated for consumers? So given that they only have, and the retailer only have a few seconds to make their buying decision, and then once you're trying to explain circular byproduct usage and all these kind of crazy concepts, so is that also a reason for that?
Of course it is. People also research what their consumers are interested in, right? And if sustainability is not in the top 2 or 3, you're probably not going to pick that claim. But I also think a lot of consumers assume that companies are already doing the best they can with their resources. Because if it came out that they're not doing it and they're using, 10 times more water, or, air pollution is bad. But I think most consumers assume it as well. And so it might not, I think it might not, even though it's not always the top choice or the top priority, it can be the tiebreaker.
So are we now entering a stage where the sustainability is the given, so it's the underlying assumption that people have?
To some extent,
most likely, and then they would, right at the moment, base their buying decision based on other aspects, but it also can come back in that sense.
Yeah, and there's also it's so complicated. There's also a lack of trust right now. There's a lack of trust in the profit motive of big companies. There's a lack of trust in our governments. So sometimes people don't always believe everything they see anyway. So it's just super complicated. But I think you have a hierarchy of what you're looking for. And I think for most consumers, sustainability is not at the very top. But if you told people this drink took, 50 liters of water to make, and this one took 2 liters of water to make, I think most people will. And the price is kind of similar. The claims are kind of similar. Most people are going to take the one. It becomes the tiebreaker, right? You're going to take the one that took less water to make. And you're going to assume that they're not going to be allowed to be extremely wasteful. But as you said, there's lots of other things, like, does that fruit still grow in the same place? Does that fruit still grow, as sweet as it used to grow? Like, there's all kind of other aspects. It's really extremely complicated to explain.
Yeah. So within sustainability, alternative proteins are clearly a major field, I would say. And they have enjoyed also, a lot of gains in terms of lifestyle, because that has really picked up in the near past, and also pricing wise, we have things like price parity in some markets that is becoming reality. But still, there has been also in that field some disillusion in the last year. How do you look particularly at alternative proteins, and what does the data say about it?
Okay, this is absolutely, we could do the rest of our talk about this topic, because it is very complicated. And I think part of the problem, you really had two outlets for, we'll say, big applications of the plant proteins or the plant ingredients. You had the dairy alternatives and you had the meat alternatives. Meat alternatives were very disappointing for a lot of consumers, and they were really, really expensive. So if you look at your vegan and your real vegetarian group of consumers, it's relatively small. So the group that you have to go after if you're going to have any type of scale is that mainstream consumer. But if they're eating a hamburger and now they have a plant hamburger, why would you pay 20% more for something that tastes worse? You know what I mean? And the Americans went all in on the hamburger, which I'm not sure was the best choice. What we see happening now, is that plants are being rethought. The protein, let's call it the protein transition. It is going to happen. And it's not that animals are not important. We're probably going to have the same number of animals because there's more and more demand for animal protein as well.
Yeah.
But this is not a zero-sum game. It doesn't mean if we have more plants, we have less animals. We're going to have more of everything. We have a growing, richer population around the world that's going to want more protein, period. I went to Germany over the weekend grocery shopping. Protein is absolutely booming in Germany in just a massive way. So, and then you have some Northern European governments that have an official protein transition strategy. I live in the Netherlands. There is a strategy around that. The Dutch are the second biggest food exporter in the world. They play an extremely important role when it comes to supply chain. They play an extremely important role in technology and innovation and so on. And the Dutch government says this is going to happen. So regardless of what anybody else says, it is going to happen. We can talk about how long it takes or how the Germans the same. It is going to happen, right? The Dutch government wants to import a lot less soy to feed all these animals. So got to think about that as well, right?
For me, it's really also from, as you're talking about the legislation around it, I think it's interesting to see that we have so many different strategies from government standpoint around the world. But what you say is that on the long run, they will all commit to that topic in the end, and not out of substitution concerns, but rather complementing the supply of animal protein, right?
Of course. And nothing drives a trend faster than the government. Because if the government says tomorrow there's a limit or not allowed, what do you do, right? But how you do it is what we're trying to figure out now. And I have to say, Lidl, the supermarket Lidl in the Netherlands has done something very interesting. They have now priced all their plant protein products cheaper than animal products. So they have a ground beef that has 60% beef and 40% pea protein, and it's €2 per kilo cheaper. I think it is a fantastic idea. Nobody will convince me that Americans would not buy that. It would fly off the shelves. It's got a bit of fiber. It's got less saturated fat. It's cheaper. It's still protein. It's very juicy when you cook it because that fiber helps to retain some of the juiciness and so on. So I think we're just now figuring out what we do. But there is still a market there are consumers that like meat alternatives. I live in a market where they do like them. But I'm not saying that is the number one way we have to go all in. But they've been expensive. And they have been disappointing on taste and texture for a lot of consumers. And now we talk a lot about ultra-processed foods, and it has a very processed feel for a lot of consumers. So there are some things for the industry to work on. And we do see a lot of innovation in single ingredient, meat alternatives, and so on. So it's an opportunity for whoever can crack something around this.
Yeah, so that looks like there's also some really progress going on the supplier side, but also on the consumer side, to really push the market forward with new solutions, and then consumers adapting to those solutions. Maybe earlier than governments here and there do, because sometimes that feels a bit outdated when they fall back into these black and white discussions about yes and no. But the reality is, new technologies, products are becoming cleaner. There are maybe hybrid products that failed in the past, but maybe now they're coming back. This is really interesting to hear.
Yeah, for me, it's about taste and texture, and the price has to be right, of course. But if you make it taste great for consumers, then they're going to be interested in it. And there's lots of trials. They've tested animal products next to meat alternatives, and when you put them all together, they sell better. Like there's lots of different testing going on. But one other thing that we talked a lot about in our trends last year is you have to make it taste good. So if you add a sauce, if you have a plant protein in lasagna or in a stew or an Indian food or something that's flavored up very well, you really eliminate that taste and texture issue. So that you just have to find the right application for it. But when you're giving somebody an absolute alternative of a piece of meat that you know exactly what the meat tastes like, and now you've given a substitute for that, it's not surprising that it's disappointing for a lot of consumers, but not for all of them.
Yeah. You briefly touched upon Lidl and also private label products in the wider context. you mentioned also in the trend report private labels as an overarching topic and also a trend itself. So private labels are growing rapidly in Europe and also North America. That's really interesting also because so far they had a certain role in the market, but now there seems to be additional dynamics and the traditional role of private label is maybe also no longer the same. Is that what you're saying with that?
Oh, for sure. Yeah. And I think the real pioneers for this were back in the 90s when Tesco launched Tesco's Finest. And everybody you talk to in the industry wants to know, how are they doing it? It was just a massive success. They did all these chilled ready meals as well that were super high quality and under this brand. And I think now what we see happening is, I mentioned already that there's a trust issue. I think we have a great example of Rewe in Germany that told consumers when they were arguing over prices for some, chocolate bars and so on, that Rewe says, okay, consumers, we have your back and we're protecting you and we're going to give you products that we're going to make that are going to be just as good. It's a great promise to consumers. So we see that Germans are very interested in the price quality aspect. Spanish consumers very interested in the price aspect. French consumers interested in the more artisanal, special kind of aspects of these products. Americans are a little bit less convinced, but it's changing very fast. Consumers have just felt very let down. And now the retailers, in many cases, are doing a fantastic job of explaining what they're doing, what types of products they're making, why they're making them. They're making, quality and price promises and so on. And that's very attractive to consumers. So it's not a surprise to me, but we hear it a lot that there is just massive interest in private label all over the world. Asia, always a bit less. They are more brand focused, but you even see it increasing there as well.
Is it also due to digital technology and the speed of trends and maybe the private label owners are also quicker in terms of adapting to trends and launching new products or product lines within their private label? I also think that the retailers have the best data of anybody, right? So they know what's selling. They know, what the pricing, the ideal price should be, and so on. So retailers have a lot of advantage from that point of view. But brands are not dying, but there is just absolutely increased interest in private label. The discounters in Germany have done a fantastic job as well, and have built up a lot of trust, and there's no stigma, of shopping for private label products. And then you look at something like Trader Joe's, which has just become an absolute kind of cult favorite. Yeah.
And it's got a super premium, fun, quirky, but super on-trend image as well. So you feel quite cool if you're shopping at Trader Joe's.
Yeah. So the last thing I wanted to touch upon is snackification and convenience, because that obviously is also a mega trend in that sense. Of course, like as people are... They have new realities and sometimes stressed lifestyle. They have to have breakfast and lunch on the go and all that. So that's already paying into that snackification trend. But as we also have these counter trends, would you think that it has a certain limitation because also indulgence, slow food and all that plays maybe also an important role for consumers, or is that holding back in some sense?
Oh, I think there's a role for everything. Even let's go back to meat for a second. If people talk about how much meat people eat, we also see that like the number of meat occasions declined for a period, but then the amount of meat people ate at that occasion was much bigger, right? So there's always kind of a counterbalance. So for me, with snackification, I don't see this going away at all. It's very acceptable to walk around, eat all the time. Everybody now has a hand for their coffee and a hand for the phone. So there's this idea that we just like to eat on the go. And now there's an increased role for nutrition. I mentioned I was in Germany on Saturday. The number of shelf-stable, high-protein meal replacement drinks is just fantastic. It must be just the highest density I've seen anywhere. There's lots of them. You can get them based on egg protein, on plant protein. You can get them based on dairy protein. There's every flavor that there is. Yeah, it's a fantastic example of a snack, but you're getting your 20 or 30 grams of protein. You're getting something that's sweet and enjoyable as well. So I don't think this is going away. Another great example, if anybody has a chance to go to the Netherlands and look at Albert Heijn To Go, it's the largest grocery store chain here. It's quite premium, very innovative, but they also have Albert Heijn To Go. So if you go to the train station, there'll be an Albert Heijn To Go, and there will be a snackable on-the-go version of just about everything and lots of fresh foods. So it's a great way to have a mini meal, and it can also be an indulgence. So we talk a lot about health and nutrition, but also these little tiny indulgences might be 2 macaroons or something very small. But I don't see the snackification going away at all. Some people like to have 6 little snack meals per day.
So one big limitation of that trend in terms of society, obviously, is that snackification does mostly not mean healthy products. As you mentioned, these examples, I would expect that also in the coming near future, there will also be a lot more healthy options, and it will mix up with nutrition, as you mentioned. You have to you can already make the protein choice that you prioritize, and that seems to become bigger in the near future, right?
Yep. In just about every American airport, you can buy a single boiled egg as a snack or 2 boiled eggs as a snack, and it's just in the case with everything else. So I never, if you had asked me 20 years ago if I was going to see that, I would say no. But it can be anything. But you're right, but it has to taste good, right? And it has to be appealing. But again, as people get more aware, and we do see overall a general trend that consumers are paying a lot more attention to what they eat. There's a drive towards health. So you just have to find that right connection with the consumer. Of that balance between convenience and health and indulgence in some cases.
All right. So I thought it was, in the beginning, I was thinking it will be really hard to touch upon every topic mentioned in the trend report. I feel we're still on the surface of it, but it was really, really nice to get a sense of the insight that you created and that has inspired Anuga for their trend topics for this year's exhibition. So thank you so much for leading me through and giving and sharing the insight with our audience here in the F&B Talks.
Sure.
Thank you.
Call me anytime. I'll see you in Cologne.
Will do.